Hey, it's Swedenborg Live. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Curtis Childs, and I'll be your host. And today we're going to talk through all kinds of goodness and all kinds of truth. And the coolest thing about it is it's not just me here. We got other great representatives of the Swedenborgian view of the world. So would you all introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Karin Childs, community manager and writer at Off the Left Eye. I'm really glad to be here with you today.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, and I'm Chelsea Odner, and I'm also a writer, and I do production management for all of our stuff at Off the Left Eye.
This is the writing team for Swedenborg in Life. So if you like Swedenborg in Life, you already like us. And if you don't know what we're talking about, don't worry about it. So how the game is played here is this is our chance to be sure we're talking about what you want to hear about. So if you're in the chat, get your questions in, get them to us, and we will discuss. We want the conversation to be you directed. And we're going to actually prove it by opening with some of what you had to say about a question that we posed to you. So this week, we gave all of you, our audience, this question, which is, what do you think are some core qualities for a healthy love relationship? So you can be thinking about that yourself if you haven't answered it yet, but we wanted to give you a little sample of what you all have, how you've all responded, like what's true for you. So Karin, you got that?
Yes, I do. These are just a sampling of the incredibly wonderful responses we got from you on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and I've had to edit them down so we can fit more in, but this was really inspiring for me to read through. So here are some of your responses. When both partners put the happiness of the one they love, above their own.
Each give 100%.
Both are doing that, yeah. Caring and compassion and listening, trusting in God together. Understanding you are two different people choosing to travel together in life. Understand each other through hardship, realizing that you're on the same team. Communication and respect. Instead of relying on the relationship for happiness, each person relies on themselves for happiness, and the relationship benefits. It's so easy to blame loved ones. Good listening without interruptions and projections. That each soul should.
Wait, can I just cut in here? Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. It's because they're talking about it.
Don't interrupt.
Yeah, don't interrupt. That each soul shows up self-governed with God first. Common values and worldview is essential. Avoid selfishness. Avoid comparisons. Learn to love and forgive. Continuously, consistently choose each other through good times and bad. Respect each other's opinion. Be true to your words and your relationship in God. Friendship of the unconditional love kind. Wanting the best for that person and on their own terms as best as one can support. Respect for one another, empathy and selflessness. Deep listening, honesty, respect, playfulness, gentleness. Acknowledging that marriage love is a gift from the Lord, humility. Forgiveness, we're all going to mess up from time to time. Respect each other, be honest, be there for them no matter what. Friendship, ability to apologize and make changes, and a good sense of humor. And finally, love, patience, caretaking, generously giving attention to each other's needs. And I just love the combination in there of being an individual person with an individual relationship with God, but also sharing that and really both people putting out for the other in order to really forge a friendship that's lasting.
I think that's great. I feel like I could use that as like a daily reader. Could we just like collect them all and publish it in a little book, and then I can just open it every day and be like, okay, I can work on this today. That'd be good.
I want to encourage everybody to go to the community tab on YouTube or the Instagram and Facebook places and read more, because it's so inspiring. And part of it is to share it on this show, but also to have it there to share, everybody sharing with each other. So we all need that support and reminder.
Yeah, and it's cool to see that. That's excellent life advice, and to know that intersects with spirituality. There's a whole discipline of trying to get a relationship to work, and the Swedenborg gives you this bridge to how that fits into your own spiritual growth and how it ties into life after death and all this cool stuff. So I love the integration of those things. So that's what was on all of your minds. And now we're going to turn to what's on your minds this very second. We're going to take some live questions from the audience. Before we do, and as we go, you may have noticed that on the screen here, we have a little thermometer. We're a not-for-profit, so the only way we can do programming like this and everything else we do during the week is to have you all support and contribute. So as a little game that we can play here, if we can raise $100 during the course of this hour, you will all get a bonus 15 minutes of live interaction. Whether or not that's a bonus really depends on how good of a job we're doing, but we appreciate the sentiment either way. So if you'd be willing and you enjoy our program, and go to otle.cosvox.com, put in a donation while we're on the air here, and we'll watch that rise and see if the will of the people is with us today to do an extra 15 minutes. All right, so the first question we have to get to is from Jenna Mann, who asks, and we'll just start out with a really difficult one. Does God condone staying in a marriage with someone who is physically and morally corrupt because you're trying to keep a home and some financial stability for children? So here we have sort of the intersection, again, between, okay, what's practical and what's safe, and then the spiritual side of it, because you're talking about God. So is there anything that you guys feel like we can give somebody who's in a difficult situation like that or wondering about it?
Yeah, I'll start by saying Swedenborg in his book Marriage Love definitely lists that there's times where separating is a very good idea, and it's not spiritually good for anybody to be to stay in a situation where there is possibility of harm, including for a perpetrator. It is not spiritually healthy for the perpetrator to be enabled. And this question is specifically about the children. Well, that's something that we can't say some blanket statement, because every situation is different and everybody has to really do their soul searching about what's best for their own children. But you have to look at the usefulness overall. Just staying together because you're married is not should not be the deciding factor. Is everybody safe? Is everybody spiritually healthy in this situation? And yeah, a hard situation like that, there's going to be tough decisions, tough pros and cons. Of course, if there's actual physical abuse, I would hope that people would get right out and get safe. But to consider that what's spiritually healthy for everybody is to not enable abuse and bad behavior, because, as I said, including for the perpetrator, that's not a good thing for their spirits. So it can be a very about God condoning. God condones love and safety and long-term spiritual health for everybody. So you have to not stay in a situation where you are feeling that those things are being compromised.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to make clear boundaries about that, like you're saying, with especially if there's physical abuse going on and things like that. And so kind of taking care of that side of when there's really not good, healthy situations happening. But I kind of feel like on the other end of the spectrum of sort of an angle that this question makes me think of is that we are all in some amount kind of physically and morally corrupt. And I guess what I want to say is that this is such this kind of a situation is so important to take it on a case-by-case basis. It's so hard to make general, oh yeah, this is what it should be no matter what your individual circumstances are. So it's hard to sort of talk about this in a general way, because it will become true or not true depending on the specifics of any individual situation. But imagining a scenario where you have two people who are married to each other, and you're both human beings who are growing in your spiritual lives. And that means having to have evils come to the surface, acknowledge them, and turn away from them in your marriage for the sake of both of your health spiritually, and the marriage itself. And so, there's Swedenborg talks about like the separation is one possibility that Karin mentioned, and another one he says is kind of what does he call it when it's just sort of wanting to simulate affection? Go ahead. What were you going to give me the word, Karin?
Yeah, simulations of friendship. Yeah, I really agree with what you're saying, because there are cases where it's more like a temporary problem, and it can be the best thing to just like, okay, you're really not feeling good towards each other right now, really upset about something that's going on, but you can just, for the sake of having a decent home, put on, just be decent to each other while you work this through.
Right. And so, yeah, that simulation of friendship, I feel like that's like where you have, Swedenborg's idea about what that goodness itself is the neighbor can kind of help in this kind of a situation where it's like, if you're both wanting to serve what's good, then you can be, wanting to support that in your partner, or wanting your partner to support that in yourself, and giving each other a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in terms of having the chance to turn certain behaviors around, to be able to grow spiritually. And then because like understanding, which I think we talked about in the soulmate show this week, about how like trust and friendship are those core fundamentals to marriage. And that, if there's a commitment to wanting to move toward that, and people are willing to engage and acknowledge, the issues that are going on, then there can be reasons for staying, because there's, a motivation towards getting better, so it's not excusing anything that's not healthy for the relationship, but it's being able to acknowledge that and then work toward knowing that like trust and friendship is the goal. And so things that are harmful to that need to be addressed. But that may or may not, like in some cases it might mean separating. In other cases, maybe it means staying together. It's hard to know.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that highlights just how difficult it is to give medical advice on anything like that. There's so much precision, and we have a tendency to think of, well, God's up here and God has very generalized rules, and so he would see my relationship come across in a ledger, and he checks like stay in or don't stay in because of my principle of. But God is more aware of the details and in the all the little minutia of everything than even we are, and that in every single situation, there are, if you can break it down to its atomic level spiritually, there are things in every situation that God is tolerating, that God allows, and that God wants. And that Swedenborg says there's really a distinction between the three. So the answer is really complicated. And I'm trying to think of, how can we add value, since we know, as you guys both alluded to, that we don't know exactly what's going on in that relationship. But thinking about that phrase, does God condone someone who is physically and morally corrupt? I mean, I think we established that if they're harming you or harming the kids, that's problematic. You can't stay in that. But if you're saying, well, I think this person, I don't agree with their morals, is God going to be upset with me keeping bonded with them? I think that I think Swedenborg describes relationships in which one person has marriage love and the other person doesn't. So I don't think you're going to be, you can never know exactly what the concern is when somebody writes in, but if you're worried, like, am I somehow tainting my marriage love because of this relationship? That's not it. But then, does God condone staying in a marriage? I think God condones us trying to do what we think is right.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult. And isn't it weird how we're left to seemingly our own devices to figure that out? And there are these amazingly ambiguous gray area situations, and the only thing we can do is what we think is right, but know that God always condones what we think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's great to just remember that God's always looking at the intentions and the decisions and details can be so confusing on earth, but God is not looking at the exact thing you did or the exact decision you made. Is just looking at that you're trying to find your way, and that's what matters, and that's what he can use to guide you.
Yeah, so hopefully that was useful, Jenna, and I appreciate you asking that question. Hey everybody, I want to say thanks to a couple of people. Kathy, Jonathan, Pamela, and Sean all gave to us during that question. We're actually at 3/4 of the way to our goal already.
Wow.
And I just want to say, so you guys might want to do your stretches right now. We may be doing an extra 15 minutes. I want to say that all of you who gave, you gave twice as much as you thought. No, we didn't double charge your credit card, but we have this, an anonymous couple gave Off the Left Eye a $10,000 matching grant. So every time anybody gives to Off the Left Eye, they chip in the equivalent money. So your money goes twice as far. So all of you who are thinking about giving as we go forward, just know that money goes twice as far as well. And we'll see. It's up. If you don't want us to go another 15, everybody better sit on their hands now because we're getting very close. All right, so here's the next one. This is from Get a Tim, who asks, I never met my soulmate. Why? Doesn't that feel like a rejection? Who doesn't want a soulmate? I can see people who get burned out on, I don't want another relationship, but nobody's saying like, I wouldn't want a soulmate if one happened by. So why does it seem like some people meet somebody who's really great young and other people don't? Does anybody have any thoughts? We're going to be, the internet is no joke. You guys think the internet's a joke? Wrong.
Not anymore.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. All right. So the internet is no joke. You think, oh, the internet's never going to hurt us. It's never going to go down in the middle of our show. Now what do you think? So, hey, everybody, welcome back. If anybody's still watching and if we're still on, this is like part 2 of the show, Swedenborg Live. So we were right in the middle. We'll just start up like nothing ever happened. We were right in the middle of answering this question by Get a Tim, who asks, I never met my soulmate. And why? And Karin, you had started saying some really cool stuff before we got de-interneted. So can you recreate some of that? What can we tell? What can we say to somebody who's wondering why they didn't meet their soulmate yet?
Yeah, I was talking about that because our life story is very, very long. It only just barely gets started here in earthly life, and it continues on to eternity in the afterlife. And so everybody is going to find their soulmate in a different part of the story. And so just simply not finding that soulmate here on earth early in life or even in this life at all doesn't at all have anything to do with that you don't have a soulmate or that you're not lovable or anything like that, because there are all these different things happening in everybody's story. Everybody's on such a unique journey, and the things in our unfolding are going to happen in different orders. And so that finding your soulmate is going to happen at different stages of life for everybody. And in a relationship, there are 2 players. And so there are more moving parts than usual, because it's not only your own story with all its moving parts and things that are going to happen in certain orders. There's this whole other person that is having a life story unfolding too, with all sorts of different things happening.
And that come on, you never think of that. You think, oh, my soulmate, and have I gone through enough to purify myself? What if they're the one who's slacking off, and that's why you guys haven't met?
And at least you can be comforted by the fact that you're both going through the same experience right now, that you both have yet to find each other. So they might be frustrated about it too.
There's at least one person that's not happier than you, and that's your soulmate.
So, and I do think that, yeah, Providence is very taking care of all of our life stories. And Swedenborg said that, for most people don't meet their soulmate, even if they do meet somebody and have a wonderful, like, it's just, you just don't know what the spiritual world life is going to be like. And I'm just thinking of times we mentioned it in our, it'll be in one of our upcoming podcast episodes for Insight Off the Left Eye, but that Swedenborg writes of experiences of witnessing people finding their soulmate in the afterlife, and there's no chance that those people could have met on Earth because they lived in different generations, you know, or they really, it wasn't sort of a lack of, you know, it's certainly not your fault, or it's not that you're not doing something, because it could be just things that are just completely outside of your control. That, and yet the Lord is working with whatever our circumstances are to make it so that good can come out of that, and there can be some value and use to having the life that we do have, no matter what.
Yeah, it's the same principle really as why does anything happen? Why do some people die as young children? Is it because there's something wrong with them? It's the ins and outs of the huge, sprawling, complex nature of providence. I mean, the real answer to why didn't I meet my soulmate is, the answer is really complicated, because there's all kinds of things. There's your individual development, and not even, you don't know what going through a particular life journey or particularly good things or hardships will teach you. And there's their life journey, but there's also all the other people you affect and the spot in heaven in which the Lord is trying to put you. There's so many factors. And it's kind of like, you know, we did this episode a long time ago that went viral, I would say, about why don't our loved ones who have died communicate with us more? That why do some people seem to get these visions and other people don't? The answer is complex, and it doesn't line up one-to-one with whether or not they love you or whether or not you deserve it. It's because there's a lot of really complicated processes going on. I would say that, Gitta, you're in good company. Swedenborg never met his soulmate, or didn't know if he did or not. He didn't get married. He had like a hunch about somebody. But if this is the guy that now has a YouTube show named after him, that can sometimes stay online, you know, you doesn't mean you're not going to be someone. So all that is making light of it. But I really would say that there's so many reasons, and you can just trust that God values people's journey to their soulmate, you know, more than anything, and is making that in the end your story will be that much more perfect for it.
Yeah, I really agree. And just trust that, like Curtis was saying, God holds this as very precious as part of your life story. If you really want to find a soulmate, that is absolutely something that will happen for you. And like we were saying in this week's show, you can be working on that relationship right now by just developing yourself as a person, because actually that soulmate relationship doesn't just start when you find that person. It is going on your whole life, and just anything you do to develop yourself spiritually, to grow in kindness, to grow in wisdom, which means just applying love and kindness to life. You are getting more and more ready for your soulmate, and because God sees the two of you and when you're going to meet, like you're both working on that relationship, even if you haven't met yet. And consider that your soulmate could already be in the afterlife. Your soulmate could, with my own parents, my dad was 16 years older than my mom, so he would, in his early 20s, like she wasn't old enough to get married yet anyway. So he was probably wondering, am I ever going to meet somebody? And also they each had to go through various things in their life before it was just the right time for them to meet anyway. So there's so many factors, but yeah, just trust that it's going to happen. And you can be working on it right now by just developing your own ability to be kind to people and live with integrity.
So thanks so much for the question, and hopefully that was helpful to you. Hey, this is going to be awkward, but I'm going to bring up again that you guys can give us an extra 15 minutes on air if we raise just $25 more. And the reason it's awkward is that, well, didn't we hop off air for quite a number of minutes there? Like, aren't we going to give you those back? No, that's not how it works. we are bound by the hours on the clock here. So if you want 15 more minutes of questions and you want your money to go twice as far, we just need somebody out there to give $25 or give $5, and then another person give $5. That will go to make all the programming that we do possible. So thanks for considering. Hey, we have another question. This is from Pamela Collins, who asks, Did Swedenborg think it's okay to get divorced and remarried? Because not all religious-y spiritual things think that's all right. Swedenborg places this great emphasis on marriage. So what about, if you're married to someone, is there ever not just a reason to get out there, but also start a new marriage relationship?
Mhm.
Any takers? Yeah, I'll start. Why don't I start? I never get to start. Okay, Karin, you start.
Yeah, I'll start. So yeah, people will feel differently about this. People have different feelings about this, but to consider that what God, the Lord is concerned about is your inner bond. Um, um, we on earth we can get confused between that outer marriage ceremony and the inner bond, and as Swedenborg clearly says, you cross over into the afterlife, you might end up married to a completely different person and than you were married to on earth. So it's something you have to just really think about, that inner and outer. And the sort of clear thing Swedenborg says is that adultery is, though of course it doesn't have to break a marriage bond, people can recover from that. That definitely can break a marriage bond if there was just, it went deep, that adultery. But also that adultery is more than just a physical act. There can be deeper ways of betraying. A deeper kind of adultery is separating what your ideas from genuine love, or what you do from genuine love. And so there can be other forms of breaking a marriage bond. This is a very personal thing, but again, I don't think what I understand from Swedenborg is it's not God saying, wait, you signed the dotted line and you're not allowed to do that. God is looking at your deeper bonds, and it's never about the external. It's about the internal and the intentions. And so this is a very personal, a very personal issue. Maybe I'll pause there for some other commentary, but can continue.
Sure. Yeah, Swedenborg gives like a long list of the short answer is there are circumstances in which it's okay to get divorced. Swedenborg gives a big list of them, and he gives this whole list of here's when it's okay to get divorced, here's when it's okay to get separated, and they're long enough and expansive enough that you can infer that these are general directions. There's probably not every single circumstance listed on there. But on the other hand, he says he does talk about like it's not just something to throw away because it's not fun anymore. There's certainly this current of like you want to try. He describes it as sacred to a point. So there's a will and an effort to make it work. I think, yeah, as with all things, it has to do with what's really going on in the intent and people trying to do what they think is right. Also, the remarried question, is in this episode, right? This was talking about how he describes in the afterlife people who have been married to multiple people, spending time with each one to see which one is their soulmate, right? He doesn't say the people who have been married to multiple people are quickly escorted to hell for doing that. So it's something that's not detrimental to spiritual life. So those are a couple of thoughts that I have. It's always case by case, but there's not, again, some arbitrary divine law that says under no circumstances may you divorce and remarry. With everything, you've got to know what the situation is.
Yeah, I think so. That Swedenborg doesn't give a blanket, don't get divorced, or that's not. He's sort of the whole work of conjugal love, or at least I guess sort of the second half of it is describing all of these the different kinds of corruptions to marriage love and what that's like, and that kind of the big takeaway that I get from his work on marriage love is like, we're human and we mess things up and we have a hard time doing this thing called marriage, and there's just going to be a lot of situations that you have to, that you can take on a case-by-case basis. And he describes these different situations of like, okay, if you really don't, he's also writing in the 1700s. And so laws and society is different today, but he describes like, well, yeah, it's very much likely that you got married only for the reputation, like for the family connection that you got through this. And so he just sort of accepts the fact that it's like, you might just totally not love your spouse, but it's still useful to be married because it gives you guys both a place to live and, take care of your kids and whatever. Like, he just describes a lot of different scenarios that definitely go across the spectrum in terms of what can work in certain situations and maybe isn't working in others and everything. So
right, and there we wade too into the great descriptive versus prescriptive debate. Like when is Swedenborg talking about things as they are versus when is he describing how they should be? So we, you could go on in that, but I think we've covered the spirit of it. So I think let's move. We got another question. So I think let's move on to that one. Is it good? Okay. Thanks so much, Pamela, for that question. Hope you found that helpful. Before we move on, the suspense is building because we're close to our goal. We're only $25 away, which will be matched by our grant, so that overall $200 will go to Off the Left Eye. So if you guys want to do an extra 15 minutes and someone can find $25, please donate, and then we'll have it going. So Mr. C and J Williams asks, when our spouse passes before we do, are they living and interacting with our spirit in the spirit realm, or are they patiently waiting for us to arrive? Hey, that's interesting to think about. Are we there? Do we take sort of night vacations there, or are we present in some way? What do you guys think? Karin.
Yeah, go ahead, Karin.
Yeah, thinking about that, I take the mixture of things that Swedenborg says of, on the one hand, people in the afterlife have these full lives, which they're doing stuff and, they're just very active and learning and acting and serving, but also that we are so connected with them here on earth. Like in spirit, we are actually interacting with people in the afterlife and can
there's somebody reaching out to Chelsea right now.
And can even sometimes we can be seen temporarily in the afterlife by a community there, like because our spirit is already there. We're definitely working with spirits and angels all the time. So when it comes to a question like that, like our spouse, I just think both, like, yes, to both. Like I picture, just from what I gleaned from Swedenborg's descriptions, I picture a person in the afterlife is doing things, but they are also way more aware than we are of how they are interacting with those that they are bonded to on earth, especially a spouse. That the spirit, Swedenborg says, the spirits are dwelling together. They are dwelling together while the two people are on opposite sides of the veil. And so that has to mean that they are progressing together, that they are in some way doing things together. I don't know what that experience would feel like from the afterlife side, but I do believe that it's not us, patiently waiting and tapping your foot there, that I believe they on the other side would be aware of how they're working with their beloved here on earth, like how that journey is progressing together and how they're, and it might be sort of correspondence, like the person on earth is engaging in something and the spouse is engaging in the corresponding thing, the spiritual version of it, and they're actually working together. So I believe there's a lot of togetherness that they're more aware of on the other side than we are. And especially today, I just do feel like the veil would have gotten thinner since Swedenborg's day, since the Last Judgment kind of started this big clearing of the blockage. And I'll bet there's even more awareness than there was at the time when he was writing.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Chelsea, I want to hear your thoughts on that, but I always want to say don't hurry because we're going for 15 extra minutes. We got a gift from Luciano. We actually now are at $575 raised. So we're like way into our 15 minutes. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay, well, let's keep on. So we'll be here for another half an hour, just going straight at all of your questions and all that. So did you have anything on that, Chelsea?
No, I really didn't. I think Kari covered it really well. Yeah.
But then let me just bring up the obligatory mention of the story of Swedenborg interacting with people's spirits while they were unaware of it. He gives this, we've mentioned this pretty often, so some people may say, Curtis isn't bringing anything new to this, but I don't mind if they say that. Swedenborg has this obscure reference to him traveling in spirit and interacting with people he knew spirits. And the next time he saw that person in real life, the person didn't know that they'd had that spirit interaction. So to me, I'm just thinking I think of it like some kind of romantic movie or something where it could be that your spirit and your spouse's spirit are spending these really tender times together with you, like on some level there, but maybe you don't remember it or something when you come back. So there could be, there's a precedent for that kind of like actual togetherness time while you're waiting to reconnect.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the only point that is making me think of is like that where we are in this world, we have the least amount of information to work with in our minds. And as you grow spiritually, and especially when you pass on into the next world, your perception grows and you enter into higher and brighter forms of spiritual light. And I think part of that is that the perspective that you get on the other side is more complete than our vantage point from down here. So I was just thinking, even in the case of a couple where maybe they loved each other tenderly, one spouse dies and the one on earth is deciding to remarry, but feels really, intense or unsure about that because they love their spouse that's on the other side or whatever the situation could be. Just knowing that the spiritual side of things has a deeper grasp, and like we were talking about earlier, really has a sense of our intentions, and so it is that deeper level of ourselves that our spiritual connections with people are with in the other life. So it's not kind of a there's more of an understanding from that perspective, and we're kind of the ones on this side who are having to really work without all the information and trying to do our best. So there's sort of just major benefit of the doubt for all of us here from the spiritual side.
Yeah, and that's blanket across our entire lives, man. We don't know what we're doing here. Good. Well, okay. Hopefully that was helpful to you, Mr. C&J Williams. Thanks for the great question. And I want to say thanks to Lamar, who made a contribution. We are now up to $600. That's because of the matching gift. That's $1,200 going into making Off the Left Eye programming possible and making it reach the world. So bringing whatever impact it's had for you out to the next person. If you're still out there and think that you want to make a contribution, just know yours will go twice as far as well. So let's do a next question. This one is from AB, who asks, can a pair of soulmates be divided, that one goes to heaven and one goes to hell? Which is definitely the next question that comes up if you really start to turn your gears on it. Can we provide any kind of answer on this? I'm curious to find out. Karin, yeah.
I think the definition, I'll get it out. Definition of soulmates means you are two individuals with minds that can have different aspects and things, but your deepest goals are aligned. And so from my understanding of that, it would not be possible for you to be soulmates and one goes to heaven and one goes to hell, because those are two completely different deepest goals. Swedenborg describes the deepest goals of hell being self-centeredness and greed, basically materialism, or basically wanting everyone to bow down to you and wanting to own everybody's possessions. Whereas the deepest goals of heaven are love towards God and love towards the neighbor, wanting to serve others, wanting to serve common good. So you couldn't be soulmates if one had the complete self-centered goal and one had the complete altruistic goal. That just goes against the definition of soulmates. So I think it wouldn't happen.
Great. I love it. And makes me think of a passage that Swedenborg wrote where he says it's something about, people who long for a conjugal relationship. Because of this, conjugal pairs are born. So it seems like it's something that God is able to foresee and make it so that there's two people that are going to find each other. And it helps to realize that to God, the whole future is present. God is outside of space and time. So you can't say, okay, look, you two are scheduled to be soulmates, but then in the course of time, you chose you want to go to hell and you chose you want to go to heaven. It's hard to grasp, but it's somehow more complicated than that. There's a mechanism in there where it's not, well, we've started and let's wait and see what happens,
Yeah, and I think we mentioned it maybe in the soulmate show this week that the Lord arranges it so that soulmates they ultimately, maybe it was in the previous week's show, we'll be in heaven as well, is this idea that when people come together in the afterlife, they become one angel and but two people, and they belong to each other, like Karin was describing, and that bond is really so deep that it really is reflecting the marriage of love and wisdom, and it's interesting to think about what that marriage between love and wisdom is, where wisdom is the form of love, and love is the life of wisdom. Like, you really can't have one without the other. So even though you're having two people who, are vessels for the Lord's love and wisdom in and of themselves, they are together, connecting together like love and wisdom do. So you wouldn't have, any false combination would be falsity. It wouldn't be a true marriage connection like that. So yeah, definitely, I think there wouldn't be that kind of a split.
Awesome.
I would add just that we have to also not make assumptions from the earthly point of view of who's going to heaven and who's going to hell. You might have a couple where one has just a very friendly personality and one is super grumpy. It's
AB is like using this to kind of take a shot there. Just kidding.
No, but like seriously, I was just reading something in Divine Providence about how people can just have a lot of problems on the outside, and yet in their core, their deepest goals are good. So we can't make those assumptions. So it's about the deeper goals. That's those deeper goals, which is what determines when you go in the afterlife which direction you're going to turn. That can't be divided like that. But outwardly on earth, you might have some pretty different scenarios, but still they feel bonded somehow.
Great. Well, thanks so much, AB. It's a great question, and definitely one I've thought over before. So it's good to get to hear everyone's input on that. And yeah, it's cool to think of the amount of care that goes into making sure the things that need to happen. Next question. This is from Nana Rosebud, who asks, how does your soul recognize a soulmate when on this earth? When you're in love, it's a purely hormonal thing, but how do you know it's soul connection through all the things going on in your body? Because you can have people who are really Romeo and Juliet, right? Really into each other, but didn't turn out that great. So what is it, how do you see through, how can you tell if this is the real thing or not?
I can get started. One thing to remember is it is hard to tell at first, I think, because there is this hormonal attraction and things, and also it's something that is being built between two people, a soulmate. Even though God is seeing the end of the story, or the result, if they are soulmates or not in the long run, the two people they're building it between them. And so it's not there in its completeness right away. It's something that you have to go on a journey to develop between the two of you. But I think you can't know for sure right off when you just feel attracted or feel in love with somebody, but there are clues I think you can think about, like just do you feel friends with this person, like not just attraction but friendship? Do you feel some mutual respect? Do you, well, I guess I'm just thinking between is this my soulmate and just is this a healthy relationship? I'm not sure how to sort those out, but
Right.
just things that might you should be aware of is don't be in a relationship if you're all crazy attracted to each other, but you feel real disrespect going on, or you don't really care about what they want, you only care about what you're getting out of it, or vice versa, they seem to be doing that for you. That could be some flags, like, oh, maybe this isn't my soulmate thing. But yeah, remember it's something that's being built, so it needs to start healthy, like be founded upon something that is not only attraction but also mutual respect and friendship and that kind of thing. So starting with those clues and then building, you will be discovering it along the way, I think.
Yeah, and it's one of those interesting things where something with the question of how can you recognize your soulmate? There's this thing, I think this is a common theme in some kinds of spiritual life things, is this idea. I mean, it's an interesting misunderstanding that can happen about God too. This idea of what does God want me to do, as if there's this external source that can tell you what to do. But what Swedenborg learned was that, the nature of our connection with God is that we live as if of ourselves. And when we choose goodness, then the Lord can live through us. So it's sort of the unfortunate situation that nobody's going to tell us, what to do. God's never going to say, go do that exactly. Even Swedenborg himself, in writing his works, he'll say, God commanded me, to write these books, but his whole process is really actually his own process of thinking, what should I be doing? Like there's a more intimate connection with him choosing to do the things that he feels called to by God. Like there's this necessary engagement, like agency of our self involved. And I feel like there's just a similar tie that you can make to the soulmate question of, to just be wondering who's my soulmate out there, suggests that it's outside of yourself and you need to find it, or somebody's going to tell you that that's what it is, or somehow you'll recognize it. And Swedenborg describes that kind of recognition happens in the spiritual world, but I think it's purposefully not exactly the way it happens on earth, because we are having to use our sense of self to really, like if you were to have a sense of, oh, there are these signs, and so this person is my soulmate, I'd better get together with them. That's not building your sense of self. Like you're not choosing it in the way it's being sort of coerced, even if it's this sense of, oh, well, I saw these signs, so it has to be true. Like there's sort of just this wonderful risk involved in it where we need to choose as of ourselves, like use our mind, engage our rationality to say, how do I feel with this person? Do we work together, in our relationship, all the normal things you might think, to just say, is this a relationship I want to be in? And then making that choice sort of in the dark of like, you don't know, is actually the part of that essential process of building a soulmate relationship. And so it's sort of this progression, of maybe growing in awareness of your sense of soulmateness, but just like how our whole lives are, the sense of what does God want me to do, but it's kind of in the doing that we start to get this sense of, oh, I do have this connection with God and God is teaching me how to live my life. But, we just maybe we sort of aren't necessarily meant to have that information at the beginning. And that's part of our development of ourself.
Yeah,
that's great. It makes me think about miracles. And you might think, well, the best way, isn't the point of life to want to go do good things and believe that God exists and form this kind of partnership, wouldn't it be super helpful if God appeared to you early on and said, I'm here and this is what I want to do? Then you do it, right? But Swedenborg has a lot of material on how miracles are damaging to our spiritual psyche, that they actually shut down our rational inquiry into things and things that are absolutely essential for us actually forming this connection. So it'd be the same thing if God said, this is your soulmate. It freezes. Swedenborg describes it at one point like a statue versus a person. It would freeze your idea of this is my soulmate, because it's just a command rather than this living, probing, and working and growing. So that's one side of it. And the other thing that you both alluded to is we don't know. I mean, you don't know. Even Swedenborg, who was, as I said, super enlightened and could see what was going on with all these things of life, he had at the end of his life, well, I think it might be that person, right? And that's as far as he got. And he was about as clear-sighted as you get. And
good point.
And somebody's your soulmate, that's the future. Even though you're living in a relationship in the present, whether or not they're your conjugal partner, that's the future. And angels don't want to know the future. I mean, we have the point of our spiritual growth, which is what allows us to become soulmates with someone, is to more and more say, I want the Lord to do exactly what he wants to do, in the future. And I'm not worrying about and trying to control the future, which is disappointing because we want to know this stuff right now. But it's just occurring to me now that there's an element of that's maybe part of why everything is rigged so confusingly here, that there can be something as important as the soulmate thing, and yet we're just kind of getting our best shot at it, So Karin, yeah, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I love what you guys are saying, and I think what I'm getting out of what you're both saying is it comes down to being in the present and making a daily choice. I want to be with this person, like that's everyday choice. And for every day that you make that choice freely, it has to be a free wanting to be with this person. That strengthens over, each day that you choose that. And so people that have chosen that for 75 years have this bond, but that was only built one day at a time by consenting and choosing that day. And so that's how soulmateness is built by God, one day at a time.
Awesome. Hey, we're in the bonus. We're 3 minutes into the bonus time that you've all made possible through your contributions. Thank you so much. I hope you're feeling that bonus energy. I just want to say, even though we already met our goal, we have this $10,000 match that we are trying to get all the way through by September 30th. So anything you give now in the waning hours of this will go towards that. Or if you're watching this afterwards and you give, it will go towards that match. We'd really like to get that whole $10,000 applied to us. So don't feel like your gift doesn't matter now. It still does. Everything that everyone gives allows this to keep going. So speaking of keep going, we have another question. This is from Eric Rockham, who asks, are there any of Swedenborg's scientific works that you found fascinating or that were pertinent to his spiritual subject matter? There we go. I know Chelsea's got to have something about this. But is it just, Swedenborg found out about spirituality stuff and then scoffed at the soulless science he was in before? What's going on with that?
Yeah. So definitely a couple of bells went off in my head with this one. I think, interestingly, Swedenborg does, I just happen to know because it's fresh in my mind. Don't think I carry this information around with me on a daily basis.
She's basically prepping us to not feel inferior right now.
In a letter so Odinger wrote to Swedenborg and asked, why you, some guy who's into philosophy, why were you chosen for this spiritual task? And Swedenborg explains that his work in the sciences were this essential preparation for the spiritual awakening that the Lord was leading him to have, to be able to have the spiritual insight that he had to be able to write the theological works. I've known that is what Swedenborg said, but I've gotten more of a sense of appreciation for what that means especially, so the work in particular is scientific works on the brain that Swedenborg has, that he amazingly had this insight into how the brain works that was more kind of like part and parcel to his spiritual experiences too. So it's like he wrote scientific works about the brain and studied the brain, and some of his articles are, even to the neuroscience standards of today, are still unparalleled. Like he wrote about things that were only just starting to have the technologies to be able to actually study in the brain itself. And but it's not that he shelved that and stopped writing about the brain, but he writes a ton about the brain in the theological works and about the way that the spiritual influences work in the brain. And that and I find that talk about pertinent, like it's has even more relevance today now that we do have this kind of neuroimaging that we can do, because like part of some of the coolest stuff right now is how we can understand how the brain works and then use that in our own actual like self-help practices of like meditation and stuff like that. The way the breath impacts our nervous system. And so that's obviously our brain. And then how our brain gets regulated, like when you do breathing practices and meditation, that literally grows and shrinks different parts of your brain that help, enhance compassion and self-awareness, and sort of shrink parts associated with stress and the fear impulse, the fight or flight and stuff. And so Swedenborg writing about that brain research that he did before his spiritual awakening carried straight through and became the foundation for him to continue to talk about and learn even more deeper insights about the correspondence of the whole human body, the brain, the heart, the lungs, blood vessels, everything. And so that's one.
And stay tuned, because it's not like we're not doing a show about that coming up in our next quarter of content. So it's not like, Chelsea, you and I weren't going over your notes for that today for the show. So it's on our mind too, and we're looking forward to digging into that further. I want to go to the next question so we can get another couple before the end, unless Karin, you had something burning in your pocket for this one.
No, she covered it beautifully.
Great. Okay, so this is from Clifford Falk, who asks, once you're together in heaven, married, do you stay together or do the processes keep on going? Before we answer that, when you were talking, Chelsea, in the last question, the camera cut to me, and I was like, that's because a helicopter was so loud here, and I was like, I could hear it coming up, and I was like, uh-oh, it's going to pull the Zoom screen to me. Uh-oh, and it finally did, right in the middle there, just for a second. It didn't ruin your answer, but it did distract a little bit.
I think it enhanced my answer if it showed you reacting with this awe and wonder.
Yeah. Curtis reacts to Chelsea's newest comment. Okay, so again, the question from Clifford Falk. Once you are together in heaven, made it, married, do you stay together or do the processes keep on going? And it's kind of a little of both, right? Karin.
Yeah, I'll start by saying, so he's specifically saying heaven, not the world of spirits. So I'm going to say, just like once you get to heaven, from what Swedenborg learned, you stay in heaven. You still go through processes. You might even temporarily go down into the world of spirits and go through some stuff to do some processing, but then you come up. So you are never not going to be in heaven. I mean, as far as where your heart is and where your home is. You may travel and go through things, but that is where you stay in accordance to your heart and your home. And so I think of it in the same way of marriage in heaven. Where there's a lot of processing that goes on in the world of spirits as people figure out who they are and what the nature of their relationships are. And in heaven, if you are married, you're going to stay married. That doesn't mean you will, just like on earth, you might be very committed and married, but for a while your spouse needs to travel here, or maybe you go through something, and it doesn't mean you don't continue to have things happen in your relationship. But you're not ever going to stop being married. If you've made it to heaven and you are married in heaven, that means you totally chose each other with every ounce of your being. And so that can't just go away. You know, that's where I feel like what God has joined together, no one can put asunder. Like at that level, that is a made bond. And you, like we were saying in the previous question, you chose it every day with your heart. You have chosen it with your inmost being. So that doesn't just disappear. That is, you can count on that. And so you will continue to go through things in your relationship. You'll continue to learn more about each other. You'll continue to learn more about what you're doing together. But I would say just the question, do you stay together? The way I'm thinking of stay together, you know, like your hearts are permanently bonded.
That's great. I love it. And I want to leave that there and say thank you, Clifford, for the question, because we have a last question here that takes a new angle on it that we haven't really been addressing, but I think it's really important to talk about. So this is from Press Play, who asks, isn't it somewhat childish to be so relationship dependent? Why should one's fulfillment rely on a supposed soulmate? Isn't it true that in the world we have this whole thing of, wait a second, I'm learning to love myself. I've been in this string of relationships, or I don't want to define myself based on somebody else. And now here we are talking about this is like the greatest, most important thing. So how do we balance those two things? What's the answer to, isn't it a little bit, can it be dysfunctional to define yourself in terms of a partner? But here we are, Swedenborg is saying this partnering of souls is super important and integral to being an angel. Mm-hmm. What do we do? What are we going to do?
I'll start it off by just saying, again, earthly point of view is very inadequate for really understanding what Swedenborg was witnessing there of what is heavenly marriage. So we have to be willing to stretch a little bit. And I think it's maybe a better angle to think instead of like looking at earthly relationships and how they work, think more in terms of the God-person relationship and how there is a, you know, can you just get along without God sort of, or like, why do I need God? Can I do it myself? So I just feel like that direction of thinking might get you towards an answer to this question better than kind of looking at earthly relationships. And I were just trying to figure out how to make that work. That this realization that I need God and God needs me, frankly. I mean, I am a way that God interacts with a vehicle to do things in the world. It is something more like that, I think. And so you get primary is you get yourself right with God. And then there is something that's more akin to that beautiful interaction where you are fueled by this love and you interact with this love that has something more to do with heavenly marriage than needing to be dependent on somebody else on earth. I don't know if that made any sense. Someone else.
Oh yeah, I think so. And I think like the way that it comes to my mind, or this might be a little too much of a cheeky way, but it's like Swedenborg's writing on marriage kind of turned the whole thing on its head to such an extent that marriage, like putting the emphasis on the internal marriage that happens inside of each of us, so that the soulmate experience is like the bonus you get. I don't mean bonus in like it doesn't really matter, but just that he says that no marriage between two people is going to happen if the marriage of love and wisdom isn't happening inside of each person. And so one of his definitions of married love is two people who have this marriage of love and wisdom in them and between them. And so then that's how the relationship happens from there. And so sort of just basically echoing what Karin said is that the most important thing is, there's this one-to-one correlation between our spiritual growth and our, and the health of a marriage. And so there's like the emphasis for do you want to find your soulmate is stop thinking about finding your soulmate, just work on your own spiritual growth and trust the Lord, and things are going to work out great. So it's not, and then that any relationship you have, whether it's in this world or the next, is going to just be an expansion of self, that kind of self-expression and self-fulfillment in life.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to put it, and makes me think that really the external coming together of these two people is more a reflection of the internal, which is how everything in the spiritual world is. You've got thoughts and feelings that manifest in your clothes and surroundings, because he talks about, as we mentioned earlier in this show, one person in a physical relationship can have conjugal love inside them and the other person doesn't. So he talks about you're trying to get it inside yourself, and then those sorts of pairings can happen. But I would also say, looking to that relationship for fulfillment, and why would you be other dependent for fulfillment? That's the way everything trends in the spiritual world. Because it's not just that you have a person a soulmate who you get really, really interdependent with. You have God who you get this incredible amount of interdependence with as you start to realize the relationship. Your community, though, too. You have a community that when you go into it, you know all the knowledge that they know. And if you disconnect from it, everybody is vitally interconnected there. It's not just the soulmate thing. And on the other hand, there's this increasing sense of autonomy alongside it, that the more you're an angel, the more you feel, even though you've got this amazing level of connection with everything, the more you feel like you are your own individual person. Even God, who is very totally inside every bit of you, the more close you grow to God, the more you feel like, oh yeah, I love God and we're right here, but that's God and this is me. You feel this independent. So I think the more you're getting deeper into this conjugal relationship, the more you feel like, this is so great working together and we're good friends, and this is me and that's them. So something along those lines, that it's not the sort of defining who you are by someone else or waiting for life to start by someone else. It's all the rewards of amazing closeness, but none of the erasure.
Yeah, and something I wanted to slip in there is that my shout out to my grandparents. My grandfather's a minister, Swedenborgian minister, so grew up in this tradition, and my grandmother has been a speaker on Swedenborgian subjects for much of her life, and she has this talk that she'll give on marriage, and the sort of pop culture idea is like, oh, when two become one, ta-da, like the beauty of marriage. And her talk is about when one become two, and that's the ta-da, yay, that's the sort of beautiful marriage experience that Curtis is describing, that it's actually when, as the unity grows, your sense of selfhood and that independent experience, or more just cool interdependence that happens, grows and grows as you mature in your relationship, and then obviously that's what's happening in our relationship with God too. So
let's end on that note, because we're well out of time here. It's already, we've gave them extra 4 free minutes. We don't do that.
Made up a little bit for our donation.
For our drop time. So I'm gonna say thank you so much to everybody who was watching. Thanks for all the questions that we got, and thank you for your donations. We raised $600 from 6 donors, 3 of whom were brand new. Nice to meet you all. Welcome to our community of donors. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Karin and Chelsea. Awesome insights today. It was really a joy getting to talk this through with you.
It was just such amazing questions as always, and amazing responses. And it's just an honor and delight to be in conversation with you all about these things.
Yep, totally. It's really great to be here, and I really love getting to hear these questions and have these conversations with you guys.
I really did feel like, we can just keep going. But we'll be back next week, same time. You got new content from us coming out all the time. Check it out. Be part of the experience. Take these ideas out into your life and go get that marriage of goodness and truth happening in yourself today. Thanks, everybody.